All right. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming. If you're watching online, we appreciate you checking us out. I'll mention this at the end if I remember, but I want to mention it now because I may not remember. I won't be here next Sunday, but there'll be a prayer service here at 6 o'clock. The sanctuary will be open at 5:30 if anybody just wants to come in for quiet prayer. And there'll be a prayer service similar to the one that we had just several months ago. So if you can make it to that, you will be blessed, I'm sure. All right, we're working our way through the book of Genesis, and we begin with chapter 5. Chapter 5 mostly is from the priestly source, which is the youngest. After the time of the exile or thereabouts, 400 to 500 BC, genealogies were important during that time. They wanted to show the purity of their ancestor, the purity of their religion, so genealogies were often used. Genealogy bridges the time of creation to the time of the flood, and there are two thoughts of these genealogies. One, age was meant to indicate greatness. If you are very holy and very good, you lived a long time. But sinfulness has brought shorter lives into the world. And so, remember, we're reading a theology book. Don't let your walk with God get hung up on whether or not someone lived 969 years. I'm not saying that he didn't live that long, but I'm just saying the point that they were trying to make is that we live shorter now because of sin. Chapter 5, verse 1. This is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created mankind, He made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them, and He named them mankind when they were created. So verse 1 is restating the claim of Genesis 1:27 that God created us in God's image. Verse 2 reminds us that we were created male and female, and together both genders make up mankind. When verse 2 says that He named them mankind, it literally says He named them, the plural, He named them Adam. He named them Adam. If you want to read through the genealogy list, feel free. But for study purposes, we're going to jump all the way down to verse 21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away. Well, verse 24 is kind of a mysterious verse. What does it mean that Enoch was no more because God took him away? Well, apparently because of their close relationship, God prevented Enoch from dying. Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament, verse 5 says, "By faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away, for before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God." So, who was the oldest man in the Bible? And how long did he live? 969 years. Verse 25, chapter 5. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. So, hey, if you do a careful study of these genealogies and the history here, what big event happened the year Methuselah died? The flood. So if I've always wondered if they sat back and said, "Oh, great-great-grandpa's getting pretty old. I don't know if we're going to bring him on this boat or not." No, I don't think they did. But he did die the year of the flood. Chapter 6. Sorry, Lynn, just a thought. I mean, really. Chapter 6. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, don't you think daughters were already born? I mean, how were they procreating? When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of human were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. All right, so who are these sons of God? Some say they're the Nephilim, the mythical race of giants. The sons of God perhaps were fallen angels. Still others say these sons of God were descendants of Seth because his line was godly, and the sons of man were descendants of Cain, the ungodly. And people would say this passage is depicting marriages between godly and ungodly. Some say the sons of God were the demon-possessed because, remember, they believed in the existence of multiple gods, so sons of God could be sons of some demon gods. But any of those, perhaps, but I think the point is it was becoming a very wicked time. These sons of God obviously were not good, okay? It was a wicked time. They were taking any of the women they wanted, and it was just the human race is becoming worse and worse. And we can look at the next verse and see it's getting even worse. Verse 3. Then the Lord said, so you'll notice that we had God in verse 2, and now we have Lord, which indicates perhaps a different source, and that's something that we have in this chapter is, because remember, they were taking sources from different tribes, different eras, and they were blending them into one. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. So some people said, it's going to be 120 years to the flood. Others are saying, that's going to be the age of humans. It's going to be shorter. But there's a reality there that we should not miss. God's not going to wait on you forever. Okay? He's not going to wait on you forever. He's going to wait on you as long as you have breath. But none of us are assured another day. So there comes a point when it's too late. And because of the wickedness of the people in chapter 6, there would be a time when it would be too late. Verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, which is interesting, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Nephilim, also translated as giants, it can mean violent. And so what we have are violent, wicked men, even demonic, heroes of old. That means that we were celebrating wicked people. These aren't heroes of old like, they're really great. No, it's what the world was celebrating. The world kind of celebrates that still today. Verse 5. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Obviously, you are aware that Christians often ask about the validity of this story. In earlier genealogies, it indicates that maybe this person was the father of all, like Jubal was the father of all who played the harp. But now they're all killed, and Noah's going to be the father of all. Those aren't the questions you need to ask. That's not what the text is about. But flood stories in general are interesting. The Babylonian flood story, which predates this written form, is the story of Gilgamesh. And according to that story, the gods decided to flood the earth. One of them decided to save his favorite man and told him to build a ship to save himself. The man enters the ship, taking some family and some animals. It only rains for a measly 6 days and nights in that story. He sends some doves, swallows, and they don't find dry land, but the raven does in the Babylonian story. But many cultures, Native Americans have flood stories. Many cultures, in fact, some form of this story is found on every continent except perhaps Antarctica. So many, in fact, exist, flood stories from all cultures, that historians say there must have been some historical context. Now, did it happen word for word as it was written? That's not the point, and I'm going to explain to you in a minute why. Well, I'll just hang in there. Humans were wicked. That's the point. Humans were wicked, and God was angry. Humans were wicked, and God was angry. So we have two accounts interwoven, the J, which is Yahweh, you'll see Lord, and the P, which is priestly, and you'll see the word God. So this is what we have. Verse 9, this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the peoples of his time, and walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw... See, doesn't it sound like all of a sudden we're having a different story, similar to the last one? Well, you are. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence. Because of them, I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in it, coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. The ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof an opening of 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, or every creature that has breath in it, everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons, and your wife and your sons' wives with you. You are to bring into the ark. So how many of each kind of animal did Noah bring into the ark? All who say 2, raise your hands. Okay. Yeah, well, hang in there. You'll be schooled. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, of every kind of creature that moves along the ground that will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. Noah did everything just as God commanded. Well, how would all those animals fit? Huh? Could he really store enough food? Did the animals hibernate? Not the point of the story. Was this the ark's actual size? Or maybe it was bigger? Not the point of the story. Is the ark on Mount Ararat after all? We've all seen that on the History Channel. Not the point of the story. Okay? The point of the story is not the dimensions. The dimensions that are given to show that just in creation God had a plan. Here, God has a plan as well. Even though the world seemed chaotic and seemed to be coming to an end, God was in control. Point of the story. And you know, a lot of people today, a lot of churches, a lot of preachers will preach the end of the world, how it's coming. And they make it real scary. All right. My end goal is to spend eternity with God. Anybody else? Okay. So, I'd like to live a ripe, long age. But if he ends it now and I get to be with God for eternity, that's not so scary for me. All right? So God is in control. God has a plan. And then whenever I'm teaching and I say, what's the point of the story, I'm not saying that something didn't happen. I'm saying, what's the lesson we need to learn here? The point of the story is not the actual number of animals, because we're going to read a different account in a minute. So the point isn't, did he bring 2 or 7? That's not the point of the story. The point is, or how many days did it rain? That's not the point of the story. The story is showing that Noah and his family survived because God cares for creation, and God had a continuing plan even though it became a wicked place. So chapter 7, when we were in chapter 6, after verse 9, the word was God, and now it's back to Lord, so we're seeing the changes of the sources. So all you 2 of each animal people, let's read chapter 7. The Lord then said to Noah, "Go into your ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. And also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." And Noah did all the Lord commanded him. So what's the deal with the 7 clean animals? 7 pair, yeah, but 7 pair of clean animals. What's the deal? I thought it was 2 by 2 by 2. That's what we sang. Something to eat. There's a good old boy right over there. You're right, and you're right. So up to this time, perhaps they were vegetarian. We're going to read about that. But they're going to be eating some, and they're going to be sacrificing some. So, yes. Not that well, anyway, let's just read it. Verse 6. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark, as God commanded Noah. After 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So, how long did it rain? Some of y'all have studied with me before. Would your faith be shaken if somehow you were to find out that it only rained for 32 days? It's not the point of the story. Jews, let's say you were writing to a friend of yours and you said, "It was raining cats and dogs." And 2,000 years from now, archaeologists find that letter and they're all adamant. It used to rain cats and dogs in Cleveland, Tennessee, because it's written down right there. Well, when a Jew said 40 days, 40, that was just their idiom. That's just what they said. 40 meant a long time. The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. That's a really long time. It could have been 38. It could have been 42. The point of these stories, and your salvation doesn't get hung up on how many days. It just rained a long time. Verse 13. On that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with his wives and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. They had with them every kind of wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground. Have any of y'all ever been to like the storytelling contests? I know they have them up in Jonesboro. They may have some others around. Anybody ever been to one of those? Yeah, if you have and you read this is really told in the storytelling fashion. Because that's what they did for generations before it was written down. And people would hear these stories. They didn't have Netflix and Amazon Prime and all like that. They sat around the campfire at night and listened to these stories. Oh, Grandpa, tell me the story of Noah one more time. Verse 14, they had with them every kind of wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground in its kind, every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. The animals going in were male and female of every living thing as God had commanded Noah. Then the Lord shut him in. So who closed the door on the ark? Yeah, there's a good Bible trivia question. But there's a point of that. And that point is God's care for preserving humanity. God's care for preserving what He had created is shown by God actually sealing him in there, if you will. For 40 days, how long is that? For a long time, the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the waters increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly over the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. Every living thing that moved on land perished, birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swam over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and creatures that moved along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. Why did all the animals have to die? Yes, they couldn't swim. But I guess the whales died. I don't know. Every animal that had breath in its nostrils. But why did they have to die? Why did God kill the animals? Do you guys remember from Genesis 1 and 2? Who is the caretaker of all the animals? We are. Okay? So we messed up, and we're going to have to start all over again. We have the care for creation. And God was just going to clean slate, start over. Chapter 8. But God, so we're back to God, not Lord. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him on the ark. And He sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters had gone down, and on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountain of Ararat. The waters continued to recede until the 10th month. On the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible. So modern American Christians sure want to know where that ark is, because we want to go find it. And if we can find it, we'll just prove that the Bible is right. Don't worry about the ark, okay? Don't worry about the ark. It's out there somewhere. The Jews of Jesus' day, they really weren't interested in mounting some expedition to go find the ark. The point of the story is not where the ark is or where it is not. The point is God did not forget His relationship with humanity. He even sent a wind to dry the land for humanity and the animals. And none of that happened by accident. Verse 6. After 40 days, 40 days after what? After 40 days, Noah opened the window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven. And it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Okay, so the Babylonians had a raven as their hero, but here the raven doesn't find the dry land and he doesn't come back. Ravens are unclean, so there would only be two. I guess the other raven found it eventually. The point, though, is the Babylonians didn't get it right. The symbol of Israel at that time, the dove, found the land. Verse 8. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. The dove could not find a place to set its feet because there was water over the surface of the earth, so it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove in and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again, but this time it didn't return. So obviously it had gone to nest. Olives grow in the lowlands, so he knew that the water had receded back into the seas. Verse 13. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water had dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. Okay. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives, and bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, animals, all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it." So Noah came out, together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground, and all the birds and everything that moves on the earth, came out of the ark, one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. So we had God, now we have Lord, perhaps 2 different sources here being wrapped together. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all of the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done." So in verse 21, the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma. The Babylonian epic says when the gods smelled the odor. But this is from the J source, 1,000 years BC. We think these stories circulated, which is that part is older than the Babylonian story. So maybe the Babylonians actually ripped off our story. All right, chapter 9 is the Noachian laws. So verse 1. Then God, so we're back to God, not Lord. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air, upon every creature that moves along the ground, and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you." This is interesting, okay? This is interesting. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, now I give you everything. So this story presupposes that the listener is familiar with the creation story of chapter 1, verse 29 and 30. See, there God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit and seed with it, they will be yours for food." So it seems to be, perhaps, although remember one of the first offerings to God was the fat of the sheep, but it seems to be that in the early account in chapter 1, we had a call to be vegetarian. Here, everything is up for grabs, which is quite interesting because later, eons from then, but later, the Jews would develop many, many dietary laws. And you can't eat this, and you can't eat that, and you can't eat this. Here, they can eat anything. And where is it that we once again were told that we can eat anything? Acts chapter 9. Peter has that great vision where God puts all these animals and says you can eat them. And I've been living out that chapter my whole life. So I like that chapter. If you're a vegetarian, I didn't mean to offend you. But anyway, so what we have in the early Bible, in the early creation story, vegetarian diet. Now anything's up for grabs, but then as we move into their history, there will be dietary laws. Yeah, that is interesting because anything was up to grab. The question is why they have clean and unclean animals. Perhaps by the time that these stories were written down, they did, well, not perhaps, we know they did have clean and unclean animals. So, and maybe the listener is supposing that God is just talking about clean animals. Okay? Good question. You guys find all them loopholes in there. Right. It's not good for sacrifice. Yeah. If it's unclean. So maybe that's all they were talking about there, not eating. Okay. We're going to have to figure all this out when we get to heaven. I don't think it's really going to be on our mind anymore when we get to heaven. Okay. But here's another point of this, what I just read. When he says all creatures that move along the ground is for you to eat, life wasn't just different between God and humans now. Life became different between humans and all creation. So there's just a different vibe on the earth now after the flood. But he does give a little instruction about eating meat, verse 4. But you must not eat meat that has lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each man too I will demand an accounting for the life of his fellow man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply on the earth and increase upon it. So, they had this blood prohibition of what they eat, and it may have been the primitive belief was that the blood actually had your life, which in a sense it does, but that blood somehow would take the essence of that person. So God's covenant with Noah, verse 8. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants and after you and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, all the wild animals, and all that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I have established my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of flood ever again, and never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you, and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations. So what is a covenant? It's like a contract, okay? You agree on that? So when you have a contract, how many parties must you have for there be a contract? There must be two, okay? There must be at least two. All right. So a covenant is like a contract, and in a contract you have two parties that both agree to something, right? All right, let's read this. What verse was I at? Verse 12. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on earth. So God said to Noah, this is a sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the earth. So, we have a covenant. What's our end of the bargain? Wow, it's sort of like an unconditional covenant, huh? It's sort of like grace. Remember, a couple of weeks ago I said some people think the God of the old covenant is just mean old God and you don't have grace till you get to the new covenant. There's grace right there. There's a God saying, I'm making a covenant with you, and God will make a couple of more covenants as we move along. This morning at church, we celebrated a covenant. And what part do we have of this covenant that we celebrated this morning, where Jesus died? He bled and died for us. Okay, that's His deal. What's our deal? Just love Him and accept Him by faith. That's it. These are the kinds of deal God makes. Verse 20. Noah, a man of the soil, some say the first tiller of the soil, but we know that they did till in the garden. They had to work harder when they got out of the garden. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it across their shoulders, walked in backward, and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so they would not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and found what his youngest son had done to him, he said, Canaan, or cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. He also said, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend the territory of Japheth, and Japheth live in tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his slave. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Altogether, Noah lived 950, and then he died. That can be a really confusing passage right there. One of Noah's sons sees Noah naked. His other two sons walk in backwards to cover him up. So who gets cursed for seeing him naked? His grandson. Yeah. What's up with that? Well, one theory is there's two different sources. One source has Ham as one of Noah's sons. The other has Canaan as one of Noah's sons. And this makes it seem to us maybe the son's being cursed for the sins of the father. Well, I don't know. I haven't been able to sort that out. But what we are being told is that the morality of these people that God saved wasn't all that great after all. Okay? Now, you might be looking at this story and saying, okay, an old dude was laying in his tent naked and some sons covered him up. What's really going on here? Well, we got drunkenness. That's implied in the story. Perhaps sexual promiscuity. That would have been implied to the people who heard this story. Or perhaps even ancestral relationships, perhaps. That would have been implied in the story. So forget for a moment, is it Ham, is it Canaan? But the point is, man, humans are kind of not too good. We're going to read some more about Noah. Anyway. And some even claim that that story is not even about Noah. It was another story that they just stuck Noah's name in there. I don't know. Maybe. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is drunkenness was getting to be a problem, sexual promiscuity was getting to be a problem, and sexual relationships between family members was getting to be a problem. Okay? All right. Well, that's as far as Wednesday got, but we can push on into chapter 10. So this chapter deals with the descendants of Noah. It's a combination of the J, the source, and the priestly source. The sons of Noah, according to the oldest tradition, is J, lists Shem, Japheth, and Canaan. The P tradition lists the sons of Noah as Shem, Japheth, and Ham. So there's a little confusing you got there. Chapter 10 makes some adaptations to compromise between the difference. The chapter is placed here to provide a background of world history so that one might understand the place of Israel in politics. We tend to think of Israel as just a tiny nation. And geographically, they are about the size of New Jersey. but they didn't see themselves as a tiny nation. So, as I said, Israel's about the size of New Jersey. The ministry of Jesus Christ, 75% of the ministry of Jesus Christ took place in a place the size of Bradley County. That was it. That was the bulk of his ministry. Okay, so we're going to be looking at this genealogy thousands of years later. We need to understand that the people of Jesus' day and before did not consider the basic principle of the organizational lands to be based on race. They didn't see the organization of lands or tribes or country based on ethnicity, but on religion. I want to say that again, because a lot of times people read prohibitions of marrying somebody. Oh, you can't marry those Canaanites, or you can't marry these folks. Oh, well, we shouldn't be intermarrying of the races. It had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with ethnicity. It had to do with who you worshiped. That's what these prohibitions were about. So, you could not marry a foreigner. That's true. But if you met this man or this woman and they were a foreigner, what that meant is they didn't worship your God. Once they said, hey, I think I'll worship your God, they were no longer a foreigner. We need to think about that a little bit. Okay, so chapter 10 reflects that the world is divided by these types of relationships. So, the family of Japheth is the least developed. This is the, let's just jump in verse 10, verse 1, chapter 10. This is the account of Shem, Ham, Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer, all those guys. Okay, verse 4. The sons of Javan, Elshaz, Tarshish, Kittim, and Rodnim. From these, the maritime people spread out into their territories by their clans with their nations, each with their own language. So, these sea-dwelling people, these maritime people, would include the Philistines. You're going to be reading about the Philistines as we move through the Old Testament. These are where they come from, okay? These are the sons of Japheth. The sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, the sons of Cush. Let's go down to verse 8. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who grew to be a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why his name, why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Kala, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Kala. That is the great city. Go down to verse 15. Cana was the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and of the Hittites. We'll read about them a lot. Jebusites, them as well. Amorites, Girgashites, Hittites, Aktites, Sinites, all those other tites. Later, the Canaanite clan scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon to Gerar as far as Gaza. You've heard of the Gaza Strip. And then towards Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, Zebulun, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans and languages in their territories and nations. So those were the folks who settled from Egypt. As far as to Babylon, the Hittites of verse 15 were the people who settled Asia Minor. And much of Paul's ministry in the New Testament is to those churches in that part of the country. Nimrod of verse 8 was of Babylon. verse 21. Sons were also born to Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. The sons of Shem: Elam, Asher, Aksad, Lud, and Aram. The son of Aram: Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshach. And on and on and on we go. Go down to verse 32. These are the clans of Noah's son, according to the lines of descent within their nations. From these nations spread out all over the earth after the flood. So Shem, verse 21, was the father of all Shemites. What word do we get from Shemites? Semites. Jews. Okay? Semitic people came from Shem. So as we move further and further through the Old Testament, and we're going to read about, the Hittites, Jebusites. You're like, where they came from? Well, they were sons of Ham. We don't really run into the sons of Japheth all that much, but you will a little. But it is the sons of Ham and the sons of Shem that we will encounter mostly as we read through the Old Testament. All right. That's a good place to end here for our Sunday night study. And as I said at the beginning, I want to say again, we won't have Bible study next week, but Judy and Chris will be here to lead a prayer service. So if you can be here for that. Questions we have for tonight? Yeah. Well, why do they have different languages? My wife's from northern Maine. They talk funny up there. I mean, it's English. But honest to goodness, there are some people you couldn't understand. And, you don't have to go all the way to Maine to find people that talk different. Of course, we talk different to them. So the longer you're in an area, the more localized your vocabulary becomes. And to be honest with you, they have different words in Maine that we don't have down here. I never knew what a chimbley was. No, I'm serious. That's how they say it, a chimbley. That's where the smoke goes up. I thought it was a chimney. I was wrong. It was a chimbley. Yeah. So, it's still the same language, but it's a different language. So, just over time, as people are isolated and separated, we have different languages. I don't know. Yeah, that's pretty much. Yeah, Rusty. Well, absolutely. Absolutely Noah was obedient. And if the post-flood story of Noah's immorality is indeed Noah, it just proves the point that we still need a Savior, right? I like to think that I'm a pretty decent person, but I still need a Savior, Rusty. And Noah needed a Savior. Even though he was obedient, he needed a Savior. So, good point. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Margaret? Well, they settled Canaan. Yeah. Yeah. It was named after them. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. All right, well, let's close with prayer. Thank you, Lord, for your word given to us. And I pray, Lord, that as we as we study through the Bible, we wouldn't get hung up on what others claim as inconsistencies, but we would just try to glean what you are teaching us through this word. Just as you taught your faithful people thousands and thousands of years ago, you want this to be alive and to speak to us today. So thank you for this word. Stay with us now, Lord. Keep us safe as we travel our separate ways. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for checking us out online. Thanks for coming tonight, folks.